Hi, this is Kai Miller with Stanford Neurosurgery. I'd like to tell you about a project I've been working on with Casey Halpern and Gerald Grant to develop a stereotactic coordinate system based upon the structures of the medial temporal lobe. Our rationale for doing this is that we've been using stereotactic approaches to the hippocampus and adjacent structures for the last several years in an attempt to reduce the neuropsychiatric sequelae associated with temporal lobe resections. We do this in two principal ways. The first is stereotactic laser ablation, in which we implant fiber optic filaments from an occipital approach and take patients to the MRI scanner where we perform selective lesioning while monitoring intracranial temperatures with MR thermography. The second is by implantation of neurostimulation device, where stimulation is either tonic, meaning all the time, or responsive, meaning triggered by detected seizure events. This shows a burn region we see intraoperatively using the Visualase device, which is the device we use most commonly at Stanford for laser ablation. And here on the right you see stereotactic neurostimulation. In this case, it's the NeuroPace device, which triggers stimulation based upon detected seizure events. But there's also use of tonic stimulation, or stimulation all the time, with the Medtronic device, and this is currently primarily in Europe. Our rationale for developing the stereotactic coordinate system is that seizures are quite frequently localized to the medial temporal lobe based upon semiology and electrophysiology rather than clear anatomic abnormalities. In this case, we think that stereotactic indirect targeting based upon statistical maps produced by outcome studies will be required to obtain optimal outcomes. Because errors are magnified with distance, using the existing ACPC architecture, which is optimized for structures surrounding the third ventricle, may be suboptimal for targeting the hippocampus. We developed a hippocampal stereotactic coordinate system based upon structures surrounding the hippocampus and within the hippocampus. We think that as practice evolves, the hippocampus will increasingly be targeted for minimally invasive procedures, and standardized outcome measures will need to be applied based upon discrete hippocampal anatomy. Particularly in non-lesional cases, there may be no clear anatomic targets for direct targeting on a patient-by-patient basis. Therefore, both direct targeting when there are anatomic abnormalities or indirect targeting based upon semiology and statistical maps of previous interventional outcomes are likely to both be indicated. Our stereotactic coordinate system is constructed in the following way. The first is we target the long axis of the hippocampus. We define this as the interface of cornu-ammonis area 4 and the dentate gyrus along the body extending from the interpeduncular cistern to the superior colliculus. Although it's easy to identify this intersection on stained sections like those on the bottom left, typically on MRI we target the middle of the hippocampal structure and look for gross divisions of the dentate gyrus and cornu-ammonis. When we identify this axis, it can be associated with a set of angles compared to the ACPC line as follows. First, the sagittal angle between the ACPC line and the hippocampal axis is approximately 25 to 30 degrees. The axial angle between the parasagittal line parallel to the ACPC line in the hippocampus is approximately 0 to 10 degrees depending upon the patient. When we identify this axis, we can then reslice the MRI through it, and this video illustrates the form that reslicing takes. On the top right, you see a typical ACPC cross-section with a red dot in the head of the hippocampus. And in the bottom right, you see that same red dot, but in the same pseudoaxial cross-section, you have the full length of the hippocampus. In order to define the anterior-posterior extent of our hippocampal coordinate system, we need an origin, and for that origin, we pick the uncal recess of the lateral ventricle. It can be identified on sections, such as those that you see on panel B here and panel C, but also it's easily identified on T1 MRI and T2 MRI. The uncal recess is optimal because it's easily visible and its position is relatively conserved with both atrophy and hydrocephalus. In order to transform from the native space to the hippocampal space, we perform a set of procedural operations. The first is we align our volumes with the ACPC coordinate system. The second is we rotate through that pseudoaxial plane. The third is we rotate through the pseudosagittal plane. And when we look at that plane in panel C, you can see the full body and head of the hippocampus in one slice. In order to identify these landmarks and easily perform these transformations, we created a software package which we call the Hippotaxy program, and it should be easily accessible for neurosurgeons around the country. It uses the MATLAB programming language, but it comes with a complete guide as well as a video tutorial, which should make it usable for those that aren't readily familiar with MATLAB. And if you'd like to try it, you don't have to be a programmer yourself in any way. After we've identified those landmarks, pre- and post-operative imaging can be compared directly with one another, and region of interest volumes, such as burn regions, can be identified. Similarly, electrodes for stimulation or recording can be compared from post-operative CT, like you see on the set of panels on the right, and preoperative MRI, like you see on the set of panels on the left. In summary, we've created a robust coordinate system with clear anatomic landmarks related to hippocampal anatomy in the near vicinity of standard desired targets. The software package we developed, which we call Hippotaxy, is freely available, and it can easily be modified for optimal use by members of the stereotactic neurosurgical community. We feel that with recent widespread stereotactic surgical implementation for epilepsy, a hippocampal targeting system will improve operative planning, surgical outcomes, and retrospective systematic study. Please contact us with any questions. I'm happy you're interested in this program, and have a great day.